Hey everyone, so today we are driving a 2017 Subaru Outback. This is the premium edition with the 4-cylinder engine, and we are going to go ahead and go over some specifications as well as some driving characteristics you might find favorable or unfavorable. We're going to do kind of a mix of both and throw some opinions in, and you guys in the comments, I'd like you to share your experiences as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We are in drive and we're just going to go ahead and cruise. So this one is the premium edition. It has the 2.5 liter horizontally opposed, or also known as flat 4 engine that puts 175 horsepower, or that has 175 horsepower at 5,800 RPMs and 174 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 RPMs. So the torque is actually really important in this vehicle because with it being mated to a continuously variable transmission, you're definitely going to run into the issue of the rubber band effect. And this is why actually V6s, horizontally opposed 6-cylinders, pair better with CVTs, because you don't have as much lag at the lower end. So in that 4,000 range, had the torque band been higher, it definitely would feel a lot slower. Now the CVT is very much like traditional CVTs of today. They do have programmed shift points. For those of you guys that don't know, usually CVTs don't actually shift, but this one has programmed shift points, and it also tries to mimic shift shock. Now it's great, however the CVT is not linear, despite it being known as a linear-tronic transmission. It's definitely very choppy when trying to resume on acceleration or even coming off of a turn or from a stop. It's not necessarily the smoothest in terms of pedal response. So, for example, I'm coming into this dip. If I'm not careful, I could launch myself forward and the vehicle is not very smooth about it. It definitely lurches you forward a little bit. But otherwise, it's a rather nice vehicle to drive. Between this and my Tucson, I can't really decide which one's better, but this one is definitely a contender. If, you know, we ever had to purchase a vehicle again, definitely would go with the newer model Subarus with their enormous iPads for radios that many people are complaining about, actually. So a harder acceleration here. There's our shift mimicry. And as you can see, it will start to rest. And our top gear here. So it does mimic those shift patterns, however, it doesn't actually have speeds. It only does it through pre-programmed CVT adjustment. So if I actually wanted to eliminate the shifting, I could actually turn the cruise control on and it will go ahead and get rid of it. I would have to set the cruise control, however, and that could ultimately get rid of the CVT shifting. One thing you do have to worry about with these vehicles is obviously the engine. Head gaskets have been pretty troublesome in the 4-cylinders, and you also really have to worry about oil consumption. With the newer H4s coming out, it definitely has been a problem in terms of using that thinner oil. The car tends to consume it very quickly, and sometimes you can consume a quart per 1,000 miles. So if your car is doing that, take it to the dealership and argue, because it's not supposed to be doing that whatsoever. It's getting a little windy outside. I didn't realize I lived in Palmdale. There's Mandalay Bay in front of us. Handling wise, this thing is phenomenal. At lower speeds, it tends to be floatier for some reason, but once you actually get going fast or going through dips and curves and stuff, it tends to do a little bit better when it comes to responsiveness as well as handling. So for some apparent, I know it doesn't actually stiffen up, but for some apparent reason it feels as if the suspension gets better as you go faster. And that's also holding true for the linear feel that this vehicle is supposed to provide. As you start going faster, the pedal response becomes a lot smoother and passing also becomes a lot easier. So I'd have to say that this thing definitely does better at higher speeds, but it's just an overall great vehicle. It handles the road well. It's very, you know, straightforward. It doesn't give you any surprises. Interior is nice with good quality materials. There are some plastics here and there, but ultimately you're gonna ride in my blind spot, aren't you? Ooh, look at me, I'm a Honda Accord, that's all stance. Woohoo, good for you. You're so stance, but you have a single exhaust, so you're obviously a 4-cylinder. That was mean, but I really don't care. So, yeah. I don't even think he's got a manual transmission in that, so that makes it even sadder. There we go. He's gonna rev the engine. Yep. He's gonna rev the engine because we're in a tunnel. Yep. You're cool. Moving on. You guys can see the CVT in action. The resting RPMs are low, but they're not as low as I thought they would be. And this is actually kind of interesting because with the CVT's goal to save fuel, the RPM should rest a lot lower and keep the tachometer towards idle, but it doesn't necessarily do that. The gear span of it is not that high. It's actually more mimicking a 6-speed. So it's one of those things where it's kind of interesting, because most CVTs, their RPMs rest really low, and in this case, this one doesn't do it that much. It does have 6 simulated gears here as well. You can use your flappy paddles on this vehicle. It doesn't necessarily make it fun, but it's not unbearable. It's actually rather responsive. The CVT, or the transmission, feels very gear-like, and that's something I do like about it, because when Nissan first introduced this in 2007, their manual mode was pretty lackluster. It definitely wasn't fun, didn't even feel like it shifted. It was more or less just a movement in RPMs. This one, you feel a little bit of shock here and there, but it's not unbearable. Highway cruising, this thing is very smooth. It's this is where the linear behavior really kicks in. Oh, you're gonna ride on my blind spot too, aren't you? Yep. So, going at 70 miles an hour, this thing is probably one of the best road trip cars you could purchase. It's very smooth on the road. It takes the road in. It doesn't transfer it up to the seat. The suspension does a really good job at handling the road bumps, potholes. It's just overall a decent ride. Very smooth. The all-wheel drive system does really well. There have been some complaints with this vehicle in terms of the all-wheel drive system. It's been a little troublesome in terms of off-roading. Some people have had the wheel in the air actually getting traction when it shouldn't be that wheel. But considering this car has never had anything but 4 wheels on the ground, the all-wheel drive system is phenomenal in this vehicle. At least in our experience. I'm not sure if other Subaru owners, but this one's been a gem. Well, come on, don't speed up when I have my signal on. I'm about to California drive it and just start cutting in front of people. A little slow, but that mid-range torque helps you. It's not the fastest by any means, but it does have some get up and go, so we're good in that regards. It's not completely slow. Does a really good job. It's just great at handling. Steering is pretty precise. It is electronically assisted, but it doesn't feel artificial like you would have, for example, the old Hyundai Elantras or Hyundais in general that came out with the electric power steering in 2011. They felt very artificially heavy, and this one has a good mix of feeling hydraulic, but at the same time, I mean, it's not overly artificial. It's very much, it feels very natural in your hands. And even at lower speeds, that was a common issue. It was so light. In this vehicle, it's not like that. The steering feels very consistent. And yes, it does stiffen a little bit just to save fuel, but it does so in a very gentle and gradual manner. Now, compared to my Hyundai Tucson, the interior noise is a little more pronounced. The engine is a little bit louder, but it's not buzzy. It's got a smooth, throaty grumble all the way through as it carries into the higher RPMs. The Tucson definitely gets a little raspy at the higher RPMs, very typical of Hyundai, but the road noise in this I notice is a little bit louder than that of the Tucson, but it's not unbearable. I also come from a Honda Accord, so anything is quieter than that vehicle, as the Honda's road noise is very pronounced and very noticeable. Potential spammer calling me, isn't that fun? Now, if you guys notice, the CVT doesn't always rest in its top ratio, so it definitely has some play. This is actually why CVTs have an issue with handling longer road trips, is that they can never remain consistent or in a speed because they're going to obviously need more power delivery. So it is shifting down per se, in quotation marks, but it's not remaining constant. So this is why some CVTs after about 70 to 80,000 miles start having issues, because the transmission is still moving per se, is still changing those ratios on a constant basis, rather than resting in, let's say, 7th or 8th gear for the duration of the trip. So it definitely can cause some heat in the transmission, which ultimately is its worst enemy, and so it can cause some problems. But Subarus are a little more reliable than that of Nissans. Granted, Honda and Toyota make the best CVTs in my opinion, but Subarus aren't too bad. Granted, I said too bad. There's gonna be some of you guys that comment, my Subaru CVT went out. I'm gonna be like, yep, you're absolutely right, because they are known to have problems, but not all of them fail. Just for clarification. I swear though, every time I go to make a video, I get the worst of drivers. So some issues that have been present with this particular vehicle, we did have to have the stereo replaced once, and then the blower motor resistor we had to get replaced, and it may be that we have to get it replaced again a year later. So I'm not quite sure if that's a common issue with these vehicles, but this vehicle has had some issues with the blower motor. So hopefully we don't have to replace it again. It is 114 degrees outside right now, so it is hot, and it seems to only do it in the extreme heat conditions, but so that probably means the fans are just working like crazy. So another thing to note about the CVT is that it does like to engine brake a little bit. For example, the RPMs are not all the way down at idle, they are hovering a little bit above, and this is ultimately gradually downshifting to keep me slowing down. So that's probably one of the reasons why it's not smooth coming off of a turn, is because the RPMs are already elevated, so it could be a little bit, you know, choppy, like I said before. And another thing to note, the reason why these things are so fuel efficient is because of this CVT. So, you know, granted, it's not the most favorable transmission, but when it increases 6 miles per gallon for, I believe it was actually the Foresters in front of me, I think it was for that one and for the Impreza, it increased the fuel economy by 6 miles per gallon, which is a huge difference at the end of your driving adventures. So basically, the CVT definitely helps. Also too, its ability to lock up the torque converter really early helps with fuel economy as well as a linear feel, but like I said before, the Subarus have definitely some needed improvement with the linear feel because it only occurs at higher speeds. But as you can see, it's not doing that shift pattern right now because I am light on the throttle, so it's performing like a regular continuous transmission should. I'd actually like you guys to comment on that. How do you feel about CVTs actually having shift points? Because to me, it doesn't bother me too much. The only issue is that some cars, for example, when you drive like a Toyota Corolla, you have to really mash it to get it to simulate shifts, while in this one it does it very early. So I'm wondering how you guys feel about that. To me, it's not necessarily the biggest of deals, but it defeats the CVT's purpose. So yeah, go ahead and leave comments on that, as I would like to hear your guys' opinions. You get in front of me and you slow down. Oh my gosh, I'm literally losing it. I'm losing my patience. One of these days I'm gonna snap. I've already snapped, it's just off camera. So yeah, so that's basically it. I don't know how much I can tell you about this vehicle other than it's a very nice vehicle to drive, and this one's actually more or less purchase versus lease. You don't really want to lease a Subaru, they last too long. Don't waste your money on a lease and then have to get another car. So I definitely would say this is in the buy market. It's a very decent vehicle to have. You will have minimal issues with it if you get the right one, but you know, there are some Subarus out there that are just not built great. So things have changed for them, but we can't always be too sure. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys go and go take my friend car shopping. So I will catch you later. Thanks for watching.